Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we will be going through what may well be my final wildcard team ahead of Game Week 8, and we'll discuss where there could be a couple of last minute changes. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, or potentially if you are new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, we're going to waste absolutely no time at all today and jump straight into my team selection. And as I said in the intro, and as you can see by the title and thumbnail, the wildcard is active because I've had an absolute disaster start to the season. Currently ranked at my worst rank in about 4.5 years of playing FPL. So I need to do something about it. And I am pretty happy with the fact that I activated the wildcard because there appear to be injuries galore. A lot of the players that I wanted to take out have already fallen in price, and a lot of the players in the team right now have already risen in price. So I'm very happy that I decided to go very early in Game Week 8 and committed to the wildcard because I've already sort of made around 0.8 to £1 million by going early and making the moves this week. So whilst I still think a Game Week 9 or a Game Week 10 wildcard is an absolutely brilliant week to wildcard if you can get through to that, I think just in the team value alone that I've gained this week, it may well be worth having gone in Game Week 8. There are lots of things that I don't like about this current wildcard team, namely the fact that there isn't much money in the bank. The bench is very, very weak, and there are a few key players missing and a few spots which are quite inflexible, but you cannot have everything, right? You can have flexibility and money in the bank, but then you miss out on key players. You can have a strong bench, but then your starting 11 doesn't look as good. So there have to be sacrifices in certain positions. And there are 3 or 4 picks in this team that I've not seen in many, if any, videos on different content creators channels and on Twitter as well. So I've tried to go a little bit different in a few spots, and that's not just to be different for the sake of being different, because I would never recommend that. But I am ranked at 3.2 million. I don't just want to wildcard into yet another template, and I do want to have a little bit of fun with FPL. So this is a largely template team at points, but there are 3 or 4 picks where I've gone different, and I have omitted some key players, and I'm hoping you understand why, and don't just put in the comments, why don't you have this key player? Because if I just had every player that was sort of key and template, then all I would get in the comments is people saying, why have you wildcarded into a template? So hopefully you enjoy the fact that it's a little bit different. And all of these players have been picked with trying to get the most points in mind, not based necessarily on ownership. But there are, again, a few different players in this team. So throughout, I will discuss where I think this team lacks and where I could potentially make changes before the deadline. And I, of course, reserve the right to make changes right up until the deadline. If you do want to see my final team before the deadline, of course, I will be doing a deadline stream on Saturday morning. So, with all of that being said, I'm actually back in a 3-5-2, whereas the most recent draft that you saw on my channel, which I released on Sunday, was a 3-4-3. I'm actually still going back and forth between the two because that 5th midfielder or 3rd forward, that basically 7th attacker in your starting 11, I've been going back and forth because I think there are really good options in the forward spot and the midfield spot. So it's not necessarily structure that I'm looking at, which is what I usually do. It's actually personnel. And so that's why I'm going back and forth. But at the moment, I'm in a 3-5-2 and I have 0.2 million in the bank, which isn't used for isn't saved for a specific purpose. It's just there because I don't see any obvious upgrades to make with that 0.2. So starting with the goalkeeper situation, it's exactly as I showed you previously, which is Turner and Areola, because I think it is worth going cheap because there are so many good attackers that you can get into your team. You can see that the goalkeepers and the defense are stripped back as basically as far as you can get them really, really cheap so that I can get 7 very strong attackers into my starting 11. So I still think Turner and Areola is, in my opinion, the best pairing on a wildcard. If you had unlimited funds, then of course you might go a little bit more expensive than Turner. I think Areola is a fantastic option, especially from Game Week 10 onwards. And whilst Turner could lose his place at any point, I would be happy for the most part starting Areola every week because he makes so many saves. I think he's a brilliant goalkeeper. And also, like I said, the fixtures are there for West Ham for the foreseeable future. But in this specific week, I actually quite like the idea of playing Turner against Crystal Palace because we now know that Eze is injured. Crystal Palace have struggled a little bit going forward at points this season. And also Nottingham Forest haven't been terrible defensively, and Turner does make saves. So do I think West Ham will concede to Newcastle? Yes, I do. I think they will. So I don't particularly want to play Areola. Do I think Turner has a chance for a clean sheet? I do, absolutely. So at the moment, I think Turner might be the slightly better pick ahead of Areola. Despite me thinking that maybe generally the West Ham defence is slightly stronger, I think this is maybe a week where I don't mind playing Turner ahead of Areola. And I should know, if Turner does lose his place at any point, well then that's fine, because all that will happen is they'll get Areola off the bench, right? Goalkeepers don't make cameos. So if Turner does lose his place, it's really not the end of the world. So that will be the goalkeeper pairing that I'll be going with unless something drastic changes, and I'm very, very happy with it. The defence has largely stayed the same since my most recent draft. So Matty Cash, I think, is a pretty obvious pick on wildcard. Aston Villa's fixtures, especially over the next 5 game weeks, are absolutely exceptional. He's got some of the best attacking data in the league for defenders too. And Aston Villa are one of the best defences in the league as well. So I don't think there are many reasons that you wouldn't want to pick Matty Cash. We spoke about the fact that the return of Moreno on the left might just affect what Matty Cash is asked to do, because at the moment, he's essentially playing like a right winger. But now that we've got Bailey coming back from his injury, that might affect how attacking Cash is. And when Moreno's back on the left, it may well be Moreno that is tasked with playing more like an attacking player, and Cash is the one that drops a little bit more defensive. But all of that to say, he is still playing in an excellent defence with great fixtures coming up. So I think Matty Cash is a fairly easy pick for me. And Udogie is a fairly easy pick as well. Despite the fact that I do absolutely love Pedro Porro, I just think that I'm struggling so much to get all the players that I want that even a small upgrade in funds is very difficult to do. And Udogie is good in his own right. His attacking data hasn't actually been that fantastic in the last 4 or 5 game weeks. That being said, if you watch the games, passes the eye test massively, always popping up in and around the edge of the box, and his data still isn't terrible, and the fixtures are definitely there over the next 3, but even a little bit longer term for Udogie, especially rotating with my current defence, that I really, really do like him as an option. So Cash and Udogie haven't left a single draft for me, and I think they both offer exactly what you want in FPL. You can see that Dan Burn has actually dropped to the bench. I still think Dan Burn's great. I mean, he scored in the Champions League. That's now 2 goals in the space of a week, and he's doing very, very well. And whilst I don't think he is a massive goal threat, and he's not great for bonus points, getting a £4.5 million defender from Newcastle feels pretty good. And I do think that the best 2 fixtures for Newcastle have already gone in game week 6 and 7, but the fixtures are still there that, again, especially if he's rotating with 3 other defenders, that Dan Burn is still an excellent pick at 4.5. And I feel like it is worth the savings over Fabian Schär. If Botman was available, maybe you would try to push a little bit more to try and get Botman into your team. And when it comes to Kieran Trippier, of course, I would absolutely love to get Kieran Trippier in my team. He is one of the main players that I'm looking at my team now and thinking, why do I not have Trippier in there? How can I get him in? But it's over 2 million. That is massive. That's such a massive amount of money to spend on a defender. And yes, he's probably going to be worth it. But when I do spend the extra going for Trippier over Burn, I'm having to drop one of my attackers by over 2 million. And that isn't just a simple downgrade. You're looking at sometimes dropping that player altogether or having to downgrade 2 players just to get Trippier in. So, of course, Trippier is a massive absence in this team. Some of you have been saying in the comments that you think he's essential. And I think he is a great, great option. I would love him. I'm just struggling at the moment. The 5th defender, obviously, that's going to sit on the bench every week is Taylor, 3.9 million. I think the other 2 that you could be tempted by is Lamptey, because Estepinian is now out injured for what looks like about a month, potentially slightly longer, which would be around game week 11, game week 12. So you could go for Lamptey for the next few, but the fixtures aren't really there for Bryson. And by the time you would want Lamptey, there's a good chance that Estepinian's back. So maybe Lamptey isn't the best pick, but I don't mind him at 3.9. You could also go for Lascelles, because whilst Botman is out, it looks like Lascelles will be a starting defender for Newcastle. So there's some other decent 3.9s. But I just think longer term, Taylor looks the most nailed. And whilst I wouldn't want to play him in most weeks, I feel like if in the foreseeable future I don't want to use any more transfers on the defence, maybe Charlie Taylor's the slightly more sort of straightforward, sensible pick for 3.9 million. Of course, the new addition here is Mark Gahey at 4.5 million, and he's a player that I really do like. I actually enjoyed owning him last season if you watched my content. And obviously, Anderson has stolen the headlines this season. He's the top point scoring defender in FPL, which is absolutely ridiculous. He's getting attacking returns, bonus points galore. And yes, Anderson is probably a better asset to own than Gahey, but he's also £0.3 million more expensive, and I can't quite stretch there. And I also do think that Mark Gahey, in and of himself, is a great FPL asset. And I think, yes, Anderson is the better one, but I don't feel like there is such a gulf between them. Gahey's actually very, very good for bonus points, and I do think he carries his own attacking threat. And Crystal Palace are a defence that are going slightly under the radar. Lots of people, myself included, are considering going for the likes of Sofao or Zuma in that spot if you want a £4.5 million defender, or maybe trying to stretch to Gabriel. And again, I can afford Gabriel at 4.72. But actually, Crystal Palace are in the top half of the table for expected goals conceded. They haven't actually had the easiest fixtures to start the season either. And I just think they are a defence that I would expect to be around mid-table. When there are fixtures coming up where there are opportunities for clean sheets, I would absolutely back them. The other reason that I've got Gahey in here, maybe even beyond the fact that I think he's an okay goal threat and I really do like the Palace defence, is that I think Cash, Udogie and Burn are great, but there are many weeks where you wouldn't want to play 1 or 2 of them. In almost every week where one of Cash, Udogie or Burn has a tricky fixture, Mark Gahey has a really nice one. Now, I don't think you get the perfect rotation with these 4 defenders. I think you would need a 5th, which is probably Sofao. If you could put a Sofao or a Gabriel in there and get a 5th defender, you would probably have a perfect rotation between your 5 defenders. But these 4 here, in most weeks, give you at least 2 defenders with a good fixture, and then sometimes you've got one with a slightly suspect fixture, but it isn't the end of the world. So that's the other reason that I like Gakey, and he is one of the first picks in my team, which is slightly different, slightly differential. And yes, I'm not expecting that Gakey's going to be the one to shoot me up the ranks, but if Palace can keep a few clean sheets, especially in the weeks that I need him, for example, this week, I think I'm going to back against the Newcastle defence. I don't think West Ham away is a great fixture. As you'll see in a second, I do have a West Ham attacker. So Burn drops to the bench, and Gahey comes in against Nottingham Forest at home. So these are the kind of things where, yes, if Gahey keeps a clean sheet and Newcastle don't, I'm not suddenly in the top 100k. But these are slight ways that you can start clawing back rank. And I think it's a really, really nice pick, especially due to the rotation. You can see I do have Turner and Gahey. I would absolutely love a 0-0 between Palace and Forest. And you could see it, to be honest. It's the sort of game where you wouldn't be surprised. So that's the defence. Very, very cheap, right? I've basically got the 2 cheapest goalkeepers you can get that are starting. I've only got 4 playing defenders, none of them above 4.8 million. So this is a very, very cheap defence and a very cheap set of goalkeepers. So let's move on to where all of the money is, which is the midfield. So as I said, this is where all of the money is, and I'm absolutely delighted with it. I just need to decide, is it worth sacrificing the defence, the second forward, and the bench to get such a stacked 5-man midfield? But I love all of these picks. And also, I do think there are 2 picks in here that I've not seen in many teams. One pick that I've barely seen in any, and one which I think is slightly differential. And again, I'm not just picking players to try and be different, but if I back players, and on top of that, they aren't owned by many managers, of course, that will help shoot me up the ranks a little bit quicker. So I'm actually going to start with what I think is the most obvious pick, which is going to be Mohamed Salah. A lot of people obviously thinking about going without him, and I do understand it, because if I were to remove Mohamed Salah and put in someone else in his spot around sort of 7 to 8 million, not only could I upgrade the bench, not only could I get Kieran Trippier, I could also upgrade my second forward. And all of a sudden, the team looks incredibly strong across the board, but you lose Mohamed Salah. And we spoke about this in the Game Week preview video. In 4 of the next 8 or 9 game weeks, I think Salah is the best captain. And I think you could even justify captaining him in 5 or 6 of them. Liverpool have arguably the best fixtures in the league, sort of from game week 9 onwards from an attacking perspective. And Liverpool are one of the best attacks in the league. Salah's minutes are good. He's consistent with respect to his output. He's increased his creativity this season. He's on penalties on top of that. There's very little to dislike about Mohamed Salah other than, of course, the price. But I actually think I'll be giving the armband to Mohamed Salah this week. And I'll discuss captaincy in a second, but that gives you an idea of how much I do back him and how important I think he is. And I haven't built a single draft without Salah. If I were to drop one of Salah or Haaland, and in my opinion, I don't think it's worth doing that, I'm not going to. I think it actually may well be Erling Haaland. I think Salah is that good to have for the upcoming period. So for me, Salah will definitely be in the draft. And as I said, I'll discuss captaincy in a second. I do then have the double up on the Spurs midfield of Heung-min Son and Maddison. And they have been in most of my drafts, right? I think Maddison is really, really nice value at sort of 7.9 million. If he goes up to 8 million tonight, then of course 8 million. But I feel like he's excellent value in and around that price for a couple of reasons. I think he'll be very, very consistent with his output. His data so far this season isn't mind-blowing, but it is very solid. And I just think due to the fact that he's on free kicks, on corners, the fact that his assist threat is so good, the fact that he is good shooting just from outside the box as well, the fact that he makes those late runs into the box, he's got so many routes to points. The way Postecoglou sets up his teams, the way that he's linking up with Son and even with Richarlison at points, I just feel like there are so many ways that Maddison can accumulate points in a single game. And for that reason, I do think he is absolutely fantastic value at that price. And the other reason I like him is I do think he's a really nice price point, where if Maddison doesn't work out, there are quite a few players a little bit cheaper than him that I like. For example, Diaby, Matoma, even in Burma, I still don't think is a terrible option. So you can make those downgrades. And then even if you want to go for the likes of a Fernandes or a Saka, yes, you can't do that in one move unless you have money in the bank, but you are close to that with the price point of Maddison. So I like him for all of those reasons, and that's why he's in my team at the moment. And then Heung-min Son, we've spoken about to death, but he is an absolutely brilliant option, especially if he continues playing through the middle. I think he is very hard to ignore on a wild card. But there are concerns around him, right? Because his minutes haven't been great this season. Whether he's been carrying a knock all season, we don't know. But his minutes haven't been fantastic. He's had quite a few early subs. And we now know that, I'm recording this on Wednesday evening, by the way, after the Champions League. We now know that Son hasn't been in some training this week for Spurs. I don't know if it's all training. I don't know if he's missed out completely. But we know that he's not been in full training all week. And it sounds like, based on the rumours anyway, that has been going on for a little while. Son hasn't been in every single training session because he is carrying a bit of a knock. He's struggling a little bit. And they want to make sure that he he is fit for the weekend when they obviously play their game. So that's worrying. It probably hints to the fact that Son, yes, is not fully fit. He's carrying some kind of injury. And even if he plays through that, it sounds like the early substitutions could continue. So if I'm looking at one of Haaland, Salah and Son to drop, considering how good Salah and Haaland's minutes are, considering they're both on penalties, and how consistent they have been with their FPL returns, not only this season, but in previous seasons too, it feels very difficult to go without either of those. But Heung-min Son, as a bit of a doubt, getting slightly less minutes than you would hope for, and obviously not 100% confirmation that he will continue to play through the middle, and we know that he's not quite as good on the left. I think he is the one to drop if you are going to, but I'm not sitting here recommending that you do. I would just say assess what information we get this week, and if you are struggling to get all three in, I wouldn't mind going for Salah and Haaland and even captaining either Salah or Haaland this week. So that's the reason, onto captaincy now, that the armband isn't on Son. There are sort of conversations going around at the moment that Luton they are a low block team, and we know that Son performs anyway historically slightly better against teams that press up the pitch and leave gaps in behind, and that could well be the case. We know that Luton are better at home than they are away too. All of these things are true. But if Son was 100% fully fit, I would be captaining Son this week. For me, it's not the Luton fixture which is putting me off. It's not even necessarily the Brighton fixture which is making me really want to captain Salah. It's Son's minutes. I would rather 90 minutes of Salah than 60 to 70 minutes of Son. So that is my slight doubt and worry at the moment. But obviously, by the time you're watching this, you might get a really positive update on Son, or you might get a really negative one, and then that will obviously help us to make our decisions. Just on Salah captaincy, very briefly, Estepinian is obviously out injured now, so they'll probably be playing Lamptey. And I'm not saying Lamptey is a bad defender, but obviously he's not a left back. He hasn't played many minutes recently, so that only sort of adds to the idea of Salah loves performing against teams that push up the pitch. I think Brighton are a team that will go for it. Even if they are winning, they'll continue to. And if they are losing, they are not a team that will just roll over. They'll continue to push. So Salah will have lots of space. On top of that, he's not playing against Estepinian. He's playing against Lamptey. And I just really fancy Salah in this fixture. So at the moment, he's got the armband. I would love to know down below in the comments, who are you captaining for Game Week 8? And then the other two spots are where I do think this draft is slightly different. So I'll start with Bowen, because he has been in pretty much all of my teams since Monday. I really like him. He's got really decent data. And the other thing that I love about him, and I spoke about this in the preview video, is that his expected goals are really, really good. So his expected goal involvement, i.e. his goal threat and creativity in combination, is very similar to the likes of a Ward-Prowse, a Gordon that we spoke about recently, maybe a Watkins or an Alvarez. But what he carries that a lot of them don't is almost all of that is made up through goal threat. So he's not very creative. He's not creating many opportunities, but he is getting a lot of chances to score goals. And I like that about Bowen. And I think he is a goal scorer. And with this midfield, what I've tried to do, obviously, maybe outside Maddison, is get players that I know have the capability to score goals. And I think after Game Week 8 and 9, from Game Week 10 onwards, the fixtures are exceptionally strong for Bowen. But even the next two, I don't mind them for West Ham. And I think Bowen is the type of player that can score. We've seen it across multiple seasons now in these bigger games. So I really don't mind it. I don't even mind starting him this week against Newcastle. And it's another reason that I am pretty happy benching Dan Burn. So Bowen has been in a lot of my teams. I really like him at that price point. I would just say, yes, West Ham's best fixtures are from Game Week 10 onwards. But I do have in the back of my mind that if I am desperately trying to scramble to the likes of Diaby and Matoma, who have excellent fixtures, not only in Game Week 10, but from Game Week 10 onwards as well, then Bowen could be the one to make way if I'm not impressed over the next two. So whilst that might feel strange selling him before his really nice run, I do think that is a price point and a position where if I want to go from Bowen to Matoma or Bowen to Diaby, that then opens up the opportunity to upgrade Maddison to a Bruno Fernandes or something like that as well. So I do have that in the back of my mind. But if Bowen performs well, then of course he'll be staying in my team. So let me know what you think of that Bowen pick. I am very, very happy with it. And then the fifth midfielder for large spells this week has been Diaby. Now, again, I'm recording this on Wednesday evening after the Champions League. We don't have an update on Diaby other than the fact that Emery said that he will be missing out of obviously the European fixture in midweek. He won't be available for that, and that he hasn't been in training. So that's not particularly promising. But we saw with a lot of players last week, they weren't in training, they weren't available for the midweek fixtures, and then all of a sudden they are fit for the weekend. So I would not be surprised to see Diaby available. And I don't think, based on what we've heard so far, it's a particularly serious injury. So Diaby may well be making his way back into my team. But with it in mind that two things. Diaby is not fully fit at the moment, and we don't know how many minutes he'll get. And secondly, Diaby's data isn't great. And I was really disappointed when I looked into it. He sat at 0.41 expected goal involvement. Now, I know people don't like expected data. A lot of people don't. And you might just say, well, he's passing the eye test. The fixtures are there for Villa. The fixtures are absolutely there for Villa. Like, don't get me wrong, they really are. But if his data isn't great, his minutes aren't secure because he's a slight doubt for the weekend, and the opportunity to go elsewhere, I don't mind the idea of removing him. And if I do remove him, and I also downgraded in a few other spots, I have managed to get Luis Diaz as my 5th midfielder, a player that I really do like the look of. Very, very similar data to Bo, and he's almost at exactly the same expected goal involvement. The fixtures coming up not only this week and in game week 9 are fantastic for Liverpool, but beyond that too. Luis Diaz, in a similar way to Bowen, is a player that I'm really happy to own for the next couple, with the opportunity and possibility of moving into someone like a Matoma or a Diaby in game week 10. And if he continues to perform and get good minutes, then I may well end up keeping him. But at 7.5 million, he's a really nice price point, almost in a similar way to Maddison, where you could downgrade him to get some funds, or you could, if you manage to get funds elsewhere, maybe try to stretch him up to someone like, again, a Bruno Fernandes or a Saka, if you can find the funds in other positions. So I really like Diaz at his price point. I like his data. I think he is Liverpool's first choice left winger as well. And I think he's almost dead cert to start against Brighton in a game that I would expect Liverpool to absolutely go for it. So let me know what you think of that Diaz pick as well. And I look at that midfield 5, and obviously the Son, Salah, Maddison picks are a very template. But I've seen a lot of others with Ward, Prowse, maybe a Diaby in there as well, or going for a 4-man midfield. And I think Diaz and Bowen, they're not just picked because they're different, right? They're not just in there because I haven't seen them in many other teams. They're picked in there because at those price points, if you can squeeze slightly more money into your midfield, they've got absolutely brilliant data. They've got the fixtures there to back them too. And Bowen in particular has got great minutes. Diaz does look like his first choice. They're playing in 2 good attacks. Liverpool in particular, an absolutely fantastic attack that I love the idea of having a double up from. So I'm a really big fan of that midfield. The only thing before I even move on to the forwards is that is all of my money. Right, you can see the cheapest goalkeepers possible, a very cheap defence, a very weak bench. And as you'll see with the forwards, I am missing a key player as well. So I just need to think when I look at this midfield, is it good enough to justify the fact that I am obviously really lacking elsewhere? I've just made a note of some other players that I do want to consider. Obviously, Diaby is one of them. So let's assess what happens with Diaby in the press conferences and let's see if he is available. Because if he is, I may well want to squeeze Diaby in. Saka and Fernandes are 2 players that I don't necessarily need and want now, but from game week 10 or 11 onwards, both Saka and Fernandes are players that I will probably want back in my team. Both great for minutes, both penalty takers, both with good data as well. So Saka and Fernandes, I don't currently have a straight route to them, but I have that in the back of my mind. And then one more player that I just wanted to discuss in the midfield is Richarlison. Now, today, which again, timestamped as Wednesday, we got information that Solomon is probably out for 2 to 3 weeks, which is basically the only other real competition for left wing. Richarlison looks obviously fantastic in game week 7 on the left, so I would expect Postecoglou, and again, I don't know for certain, I would expect Postecoglou to continue with the front 3 of Richarlison on the left, Son through the middle, and Kulusevski on the right, and Richarlison is 6.7 million. Now, this offers you 2 potential opportunities. You could go for Richarlison as a triple Spurs attack. A lot of people won't like that, but the fixtures are there over the next 2. So instead of Diaz or instead of Bowen, you could go for a Richarlison, have him for the next few, and then have the possibility to move to a Matoma or a Diaby again, or a player like that in game week 10 or 11. The only reason that I don't necessarily like that is, again, it is all of your eggs in one basket. You need Spurs to score goals. But on top of that, you obviously have to remove Udogie, and there aren't many defenders that I like other than Udogie and Pedro Porro in that spot, enough to justify not only losing one of Bowen and Diaz, but also losing Udogie in that defence. So I'm maybe less keen on the triple up on the Spurs attack. The other option you've got is dropping one of Son or Maddison and having Richarlison instead. A lot of people will dislike that because Richarlison is a troll. His finishing hasn't been great. He's been low on confidence. But the data is there. The data is very similar to Maddison, not quite that of Son. But if you are saving 1.2 on Maddison, and I don't even know how much, a ridiculous amount, like 2.5 million on Heung-min Son, it may well be worth doing, especially if your team value isn't great. So I will consider it. Maybe not going to do it, but it's definitely something that I'll consider. So Diaby and Richarlison, if I were to predict 2 players that may well make their way into my midfield, those would be the 2. But I'm very happy with it for now. Let's move on to the 2 forwards. So moving on to the 2 forwards, and you can see this is where, along with obviously having a very cheap bench and goalkeeper situation and defence as well, you can see the issues with having a very expensive midfield is that I don't have Ollie Watkins in this team alongside Kieran Trippier. So we've spoken about all week that you've basically got to decide between one of Watkins and Trippier, and I'm sat here with neither in my team. But it's not necessarily because I'm trying to be different. It's for 2 reasons. I love the 5 midfield picks. I am really happy still with the cheap defence, and I do really like the alternative in Alvarez. But of course, I would love to have Watkins in here. And if I had the team value to do it, my team value isn't great this season, then I probably would have Watkins ahead of Alvarez, but I just don't. And if I want to get the players that I've got in already, then I can't quite afford Watkins. And obviously the other player that I would love to have in here is Darwin, but I do feel like I've covered the Liverpool attack enough with Diaz and Salah. Now, before I even discuss Alvarez and Haaland, there will be a lot of comments around the lack of Aston Villa attackers, and I 100% agree. The next 5 are ridiculous for Aston Villa, and they are sort of the 6th or 7th best attack in the league for expected goals. So, by all accounts, it seems very silly not having any Aston Villa attackers. But the reason for that is basically, if I have Diaby where Diaz is, then I have the funds to get Watkins in. So, for most of this week, the team has been almost identical to this, but instead of Diaz and Alvarez, I've had Diaby and Watkins. Now, I then decided that maybe if Diaby's a bit of a doubt and I'm not overly convinced by his data, maybe I don't want Diaby in that spot. And the only other player that really interested me was Diaz. Now, to get Diaz, I had to drop Watkins down to Alvarez. So essentially, at the moment in a lot of my teams, it's either double Aston Villa attack, which creates an Aston Villa triple up, or no Aston Villa attackers, which is obviously only one Aston Villa player, which is a massive difference and could result in a ridiculous point swing. And I'm just sort of going back and forth between that. And I know people fixate on the fact that there are no Aston Villa attackers, but I would ask you to reframe it in, I now get a Liverpool and a Man City attacker, which may even be better potentially than Diaby and Watkins. I'm not saying it necessarily will be, but that's the way that you have to view it. It's not just that you're losing Diaby and Watkins, you're also gaining Diaz and Alvarez. And when I look at my attack in its entirety, I now have double Liverpool, double Spurs, double Man City. And I think they are 3 of the better attacks in the league. And I can see all 3 teams over the coming game weeks scoring a lot of goals. Obviously, on Alvarez and Haaland, lots of people talking about going without Man City altogether. Not just dropping Alvarez, but dropping Haaland himself. And I understand why. Like, you can put together a really nice draft whilst removing Erling Haaland. And the fixtures aren't fantastic. But I feel like maybe we're overplaying how bad the fixtures are slightly. Arsenal away is the tricky one. I'm not expecting tons of goals from Man City in this game, and this is the game that I would rather not have Alvarez and Haaland for. But the 2 after that are Brighton at home and Manchester United away, and they've got Bournemouth at home in game week 11. So as a 3, Brighton, who have been really poor defensively to the point where I'm happy captaining Salah this week, then Manchester United, who are an absolute mess at the moment. I'm a United fan, I'm expecting us to get battered, and then Bournemouth at home. So I actually think if you look at the next 4 for Manchester City, the fixtures are actually pretty decent. Obviously, beyond that, they then have a few more tricky fixtures too. But then from game week 15 onwards, I think the fixtures turn once again for Manchester City for the better. So I actually don't think the fixtures are as bad as maybe we're first thinking. Obviously, they're not ideal. And once again, if I had the money, I'd probably be sat here with Ollie Watkins in my team, telling you why he's such a fantastic option. And I want to make it clear, I have nothing against Watkins. I have nothing against Trippier. If I had unlimited funds, I would get both in my team. I'm just looking at Diaz and Bowen ahead of the likes of Trippier and ahead of the likes of Watkins as maybe routes to get points above and beyond other people because I value them both as FPL assets. You might think that I'm just slightly overthinking it. Maybe the most sensible play is to drop Diaz to Diaby, put Watkins where Alvarez is, and all of a sudden the team is looking maybe a little bit more like the template, and I'm getting players from that Aston Villa attack. But I really like this team in and of itself. I think it's fantastic. And like I said, I think I'm covering a lot of attackers from 3 of the best attacks in the league. Obviously, at the moment, I have Mabama on the bench. I do have the funds to go from Mabama to Archer. If Archer doesn't rise tonight, that's something I'll consider. But I am wondering, do I want to use that little bit of money I have in the bank to do Mabama to Archer? I would love to know down below in the comments because that's something that I think you can contribute. Do you think that's worth it? Or is my bench currently okay? Because at the moment, obviously, Burn and Taylor both play. And every single week, I'll have one decent defender on the bench. Taylor does play every week. So whilst I wouldn't want to rely on him, at the moment, he looks fairly nailed. So do I need to have Archer as that sort of third forward? Or do you think I can get away with the team as it is? I suppose my only concern is I do have Diaz and I do have Alvarez. And both are slight rotation risks. That being said, they both tend to come off the bench anyway. So at the moment, I think it's worth just trying to save a little bit of money in the bank if I can. So that is the team. A little bit different, as I said. I think the main 3 spots where I think it's different to the template is Gahey, Diaz, and Bowen. And I've also not seen Alvarez in too many teams because I think a lot of people are opting for a 3-5-2 with Watkins and Haaland up top. I would love to know your thoughts down below. This is, of course, not the final product. But what I'd like to now do is move over to the official FPL site and just have a little bit of a sort of live tinker, almost like a live stream, where I just show you where a few of the spots might change. And if I do bring in Diaby, how that might affect the squad and other certain moves. So we're going to go over and move over there and do that now. So guys, as I said, let's move over to the official site and just have a little bit of a tinker around with this squad and discuss where I might possibly make some last minute changes. Again, if you do want to see my final team, make sure to tune into the deadline stream on Saturday morning where I'll go through any final changes that I might have made based on the press conferences. And of course, tomorrow on Friday, we will have the deadline decisions video. I'll be going through your final questions and dilemmas. So make sure to subscribe. And also, while you're at it, make sure to drop a like on the video too. So this is the team that I've just presented to you. I did make the rookie error, by the way, of selling Alvarez because I was like, I don't think I want him. I think I'll go with Watkins in a 3-5-2. And I also wanted to bring in Bowen and Maddison, who were both looking like they were going to rise in price. So when you're trying to catch price rises throughout the week, obviously I can't bring in Alvarez, Watkins, Bowen, Son, Maddison, Salah, all of these players that might rise because you don't have the funds. So you have to try and work out who you think you might want. And I thought there's more chance of me wanting Maddison and Bowen than Alvarez. And I thought I would want Watkins ahead of Alvarez. So I've removed probably the wrong players. But all of that being said, I might have lost a little bit of value there. This is the team that I showed to you. But as I said, if I just now, in that Luis Diaz spot, put Diaby back in, and in that Alvarez spot, like I said, I can put Ollie Watkins in, and I 0.1 in the bank. So it may well be that if we get a really positive update on Diaby, and he looks like he's fit, and I do think that Watkins is worth it, I may well just go back up to that Aston Villa triple attack and have Diaby and Watkins. And I know it seems strange that I'm either saying no Aston Villa attackers or both, and that isn't the only option, but it just makes sense with the squad structure. The other choice that I might have is, let's say I don't want to go for I do want to go for Ollie Watkins, but maybe I don't want Diaby in there because he's either injured or he's a bit of a doubt, or I just don't think he's the best option. As I said, in that spot there, I could go for Richarlison. So it would be the triple Spurs attack. It's not necessarily ideal, but it does give me three really good players. And I mean, the fixtures that they've got coming up, we'll just have a look here. Luton, Fulham, Palace. And then around game week 10 or maybe going into game week 11, I can bring in either Matoma or Diaby. And at the moment, I think it could well be Matoma because Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United, Forest, in those four there, I probably will want a Brighton attacker because they are arguably the best attack in the league this season. I mean, the data that they put up is absolutely unbelievable. Of course, if I bring Richarlison into that spot, it does mean that I have to lose Udogie, but I would have 4.7. So I'm thinking it would probably be Gabriel that comes in. And in doing so, I think I still have a pretty decent defense. So that is one option. If I decide I want Watkins, but I don't want Diaby, then I can still do that. But as you can see, the decision then is Gabriel, Richarlison, and Watkins versus Alvarez, Diaz, and Udogie. I think I might actually prefer the Alvarez, Diaz, and Udogie. Personally, maybe. I think I'll have to decide on that myself, but that is one other possibility. Of course, the other possibility I have is to move to a 4-4-2 and actually try and get Trippier in. So let's say I do want Watkins. I can actually maybe switch this spot out here and go like Chukwuemeka in this spot here, and then try and stretch to a Kieran Trippier in this spot, right? So in doing so, I would be in a 4-4-2. The issue that I've got here is that I have to play Cash, Gahey, Burn, and Trippier every single week. Unless I downgrade Bowen, and then maybe I can get in someone instead of Charlie Taylor, and then I have a bit of a rotation amongst that back five. But, I mean, none of it's ideal. The other option is rather than Watkins, maybe in this spot here, I go Darwin, right? And that could be a decent 4-4-2, because in that spot, then in the Charlie Taylor spot, I could get, obviously, Vladimir, Sofau, and then I could change Mabama to Archer. Right, so Arch would go in that spot. And then you've got a really nice rotation between those five defenders at the back. You play four of them each week. Salah, Maddison, Son, Bowen, Darwin, Haaland. And then you've got Archer on the bench. I think Chukwuemeka, once he comes back, should get decent enough minutes. So I don't hate that as an option. But again, I think maybe just overthinking it slightly and just trying to do something different for the sake of it. So as you can see, this was the way that the team was set up all throughout the week, right? I haven't really fluctuated off this too much at all. But then over the last sort of maybe today, mainly Wednesday at the time of me recording this, I've just thought I really do like the idea of getting Alvarez and Diaz in for Diaby and Watkins, but I also don't like the idea of completely removing an Aston Villa attacker. So with all of that being said throughout this video, I would love to know what you think down below. Am I overthinking it? Should I have a Villa attacker in there? Do you still think Trippier is so essential that I should reconsider? Are you happy with a lot of the decisions I've made? I mean, I'm not at a great rank at the moment, so I'm always open to advice. And hopefully this will be the start of a really nice run of green arrows. And of course, if you do have any of your own questions, make sure to drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to respond to as many as possible. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 8 team selection, my wildcard draft, and we are hoping that we can get some green arrows here on this channel because it feels like it has been a very long time. If you did enjoy today's video and you've enjoyed the content throughout the week, please do make sure to drop a like. And if you are somehow yet not subscribed, but you've made it to the end of the video, please do consider subscribing. And one request, which I don't usually do, but it is important, if you've subscribed but you've not turned on notifications, that little bell next to the subscribe button, make sure you turn on notifications and make sure you've gone to your settings and allowed your phone to get YouTube notifications to your phone as well, because then as soon as I upload every single day, and I pretty much do upload most days now, you get a notification to your phone as soon as that video goes live, and obviously you're more likely to watch it as a result. So thank you very much for watching today, and I'll see you tomorrow for the deadline decisions video. But thank you, cheers, bye-bye.